The morning alarm buzzed through the metal halls of Station Harmony. Jiho Kim rolled out of his small bed and looked through the window at the stars beyond. He had been living on this space station for 3 months now, but he still could not believe he was here. Station Harmony was huge. It spun slowly in space, creating fake gravity for all the students who lived inside. The station looked like a giant wheel with many spokes reaching toward the center. Each section housed different alien species, all learning together in what the galaxy called the Intergalactic Educational Facility. Jiho was one of only 12 humans at the academy. His species was new to the galactic community. Most of the other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Humans had only joined the Galactic Alliance 5 years ago. He walked to the bathroom and splashed water on his face. The water here tasted different from Earth water. Everything here was different. The air smelled like metal and strange flowers. The gravity felt lighter than home. Even the colors seemed brighter under the artificial suns. As Jiho got dressed in his academy uniform, he thought about his sister Mina. She worked here as a teacher's aide in the Cultural Studies department. She had been the one to get him accepted into this program. "You need to see the galaxy," she had told him. "Humans need to understand our neighbors." The hallway outside his room was already busy with students heading to breakfast. Jiho watched them with curious eyes. There were so many different types of beings here. The cerebrals floated past him without touching the ground. Their large heads pulsed with soft blue light as they communicated through thoughts alone. They never spoke out loud because they considered vocal communication primitive. A group of Zephyrite skittered by on 6 thin legs. Their insect-like bodies clicked and chirped as they talked to each other in their buzzing language. Their compound eyes reflected the hall lights like tiny mirrors. 2 saurians stomped past, their heavy feet making the floor shake slightly. They were tall and muscular, with thick green scales covering their bodies. Their reptilian faces showed sharp teeth when they spoke. Most students moved out of their way quickly. But it was the Valyrians who caught Jiho's attention most. They were beautiful in a way that made him stop and stare. Their skin looked like it was made of living crystal, transparent enough to show soft light moving underneath. When they were happy, golden patterns flowed across their bodies like slow lightning. When they were sad, the light turned blue and moved like tears. Jiho had learned that Valyrians were peaceful people. They created art with their minds, sharing beautiful thoughts and feelings through their telepathic abilities. They had never fought a war in their entire history. Other species often called them weak because of this. The dining hall was enormous, with sections designed for different species' needs. Some aliens needed special gases to breathe while they ate. Others required different gravity levels. The Valyrians sat in an area filled with soft, colorful lights that helped them digest their food. Jiho got his breakfast from the human section. The food was made to taste like Earth food, but it was not quite right. The eggs were too yellow and the bread was too sweet. He missed his mother's cooking. He found an empty table and sat down to eat. Most students stayed with their own species during meals. It was easier that way. No one had to worry about offending someone else's customs or accidentally eating something sacred to another culture. As he ate, Jiho watched a young Valyrian girl sitting alone at a nearby table. She looked about his age, maybe 16 in human years. Her skin flickered with nervous purple patterns as she picked at her food. Other students walked past her table without stopping to say hello. Her name was Nari, though Jiho did not know this yet. She had been at the academy for 2 years, but she still ate alone most days. The other Valyrian students were older and did not include her in their groups. Students from other species found her too quiet and strange. Nari's crystalline skin showed her emotions clearly, which made other students uncomfortable. When she was embarrassed, red patterns swirled across her face. When she was lonely, which was often, her whole body dimmed to a sad blue-gray color. She noticed Jiho looking at her and quickly looked away. Her skin flashed bright pink with embarrassment. Humans were still new and unknown to her. She had heard they were violent creatures who fought wars on their home planet. The idea scared her. Jiho wanted to go talk to her, but he did not know if it would be welcome. Cultural mistakes could cause big problems at the academy. Last month, a cerebral student had accidentally insulted a Zephyrite by calling their nest art primitive decoration. The 2 species had stopped talking to each other for weeks. The breakfast period ended, and students began heading to their first classes. Jiho gathered his electronic study pad and joined the flow of beings moving through the corridors. His first class was Galactic History, taught by an ancient cerebral named Professor Vex. The classroom had floating chairs that adjusted to each species' body type. Jiho's chair was simple, designed for human proportions. The Zephyrite students perched on tall, thin seats that let their legs hang freely. Professor Vex floated at the front of the room, his large head glowing softly as he projected thoughts into a holographic display. Today's lesson was about the great peace treaties that had ended the last major galactic conflicts 300 years ago. Most species learned that war brings only destruction. The professor's thoughts appeared as text in the air. Peaceful cooperation became the way forward for all civilized beings. Jiho raised his hand. Speaking out loud in a cerebral's class was considered rude, but humans had not yet learned to communicate telepathically. "Professor," he said quietly, "what about species that still use physical force?" The classroom fell silent. Several students turned to look at Jiho with curiosity and concern. Physical force was not discussed in polite galactic society. Professor Vex's head pulsed with what might have been annoyance. Such species are considered primitive and dangerous. They are not welcome in civilized space until they evolve past such behaviors. Jiho nodded and wrote notes on his pad, but he felt confused. Humans still had armies and police forces on Earth. Did that make them primitive? Were they not really welcome here? After class, he walked slowly toward his next lesson. The station's artificial day cycle was beginning, and soft light filled the corridors through large windows showing the stars outside. As he turned a corner near the botanical gardens, he heard voices ahead. Not friendly voices, but angry ones. Someone was in trouble. Jiho quickened his pace, his human instincts telling him to investigate. What he would see around that corner would change everything for him, and for a lonely Valerian girl whose only crime was being different. The sounds got louder as he approached, and his hands formed fists without him thinking about it. On Earth, those sounds meant someone needed help. In space, Jiho was about to learn the rules were very different. Jiho moved quietly toward the voices. The botanical gardens were usually peaceful during class time. Most students avoided this area because it was far from the main academic buildings. The gardens were filled with plants from dozens of different worlds, creating a maze of colorful flowers and strange trees. As he got closer, Jiho could hear what was happening more clearly. Someone was crying. The sound was not like human crying, but more like musical notes that went up and down in a sad pattern. It was a Valerian crying. He crept behind a large tree with purple leaves and looked through the branches. What he saw made his stomach feel sick. Nari, the lonely Valerian girl from breakfast, was on her knees in the dirt. Her crystalline skin was flashing with rapid bursts of blue and purple light. These were distress colors Jiho had learned in his cultural studies class. She was terrified. Standing over her were two large figures. The bigger one was Dawan, a Saurian student from the Advanced Combat Training Program. His green scales looked almost black in the garden shadows. His yellow eyes stared down at Nari with cold amusement. Next to him stood Hyun, a Zephyrite whose 6 legs made clicking sounds on the stone path. His compound eyes reflected light like tiny mirrors as he watched his friend torment the helpless girl. "Look at the pretty lights," Dawan said in his deep, rough voice. "The little crystal girl is scared. Maybe she should go home to her peaceful planet where nothing bad ever happens. She does not belong here." Hyun added, his buzzing voice full of meanness. "Weak species should stay in their own space. This academy is for strong beings only." Nari tried to stand up, but Dawan pushed her back down with his large foot. She fell forward, her hands touching the dirty ground. Her skin began flashing with even brighter patterns of distress. "Please," she whispered in her musical voice. "I have done nothing wrong to you," Dawan laughed. It was not a happy sound. "You exist. That is wrong enough. Your whole species is useless. You cannot fight. You cannot protect yourselves. You just make pretty lights and think beautiful thoughts." This had been going on for weeks now. Dawan and his friends had decided that Nari was an easy target for their frustrations. They were failing some of their classes, and taking their anger out on someone weaker made them feel better about themselves. It had started small. They would bump into her in the hallways and not say sorry. They would sit at her table during meals and make loud jokes about how weak Valerians were. They would hide her study materials and watch her panic when she could not find them. But it was getting worse. Last week, they had cornered her in the library and forced her to clean up a mess they had made. They told her it was good practice for her future job as a servant to stronger species. The academy teachers knew something was happening, but they followed the old galactic tradition of non-interference. Each species was supposed to handle their own problems. If Valerian students could not stand up for themselves, that was their own weakness to overcome. Most other students who saw the bullying happen would look away and keep walking. Getting involved in conflicts between different species could cause diplomatic problems. It was safer to pretend nothing was happening. "You know what I think," Darwin said, reaching down to grab a handful of dirt. "I think you should taste some of this earth. Maybe it will help you grow stronger like the plants here." Nari's eyes went wide with fear. Her skin began flashing so rapidly that it looked like a broken light. "No, please do not make me do that." "Make you?" Hyun buzzed with laughter. "We are not making you do anything. We are just suggesting that you might want to eat some dirt, for your health." This was how bullies worked throughout the galaxy. They never directly forced their victims to do things. They just created situations where the victim felt they had no choice. This way, if anyone asked later, they could say they never actually hurt anyone. Darwin held the dirt close to Nari's face. "Open your mouth, little crystal girl. Time for lunch." Nari looked around desperately for help, but the garden was empty except for her tormentors. Her telepathic abilities were useless here. She could sense Darwin and Hyun's thoughts, but they were full of dark amusement and cruelty. There was no kindness there to appeal to. She could try to run, but Zephyrite were much faster than Valerians. Hyun would catch her before she got 10 steps. She could scream for help, but who would come? And even if someone did come, would they help her or just tell her to solve her own problems? With tears flowing down her crystalline cheeks, Nari opened her mouth slightly. She felt completely alone in the universe. "That is a good girl," Darwin said, moving the dirt closer to her lips. "See how easy life is when you know your place?" From his hiding spot behind the tree, Jiho watched in growing anger. His hands were clenched into fists so tight that his knuckles had turned white. His heart was beating fast and he could feel heat rising in his face. This was wrong. Everything about this situation was wrong. On Earth, if someone saw a bigger person hurting a smaller person like this, they would do something about it. They would not just stand there and watch it happen, but this was not Earth. This was a place where different species minded their own business, where getting involved could cause problems between entire civilizations, where humans were still new and trying to prove they belonged. Jiho knew he should probably walk away. Report what he saw to a teacher later. Let the proper authorities handle it through official channels. That was how things worked in civilized galactic society. But as he watched Nari's skin flash with terror and despair, something deep inside him rejected that idea completely. Some things were more important than politics or diplomacy or following proper procedures. Some things required immediate action. Jiho took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the tree. His footsteps on the stone path made both bullies look up in surprise. "Hey," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Let me handle this." The words came out before he really thought about what he was saying. But as soon as he spoke them, he knew there was no turning back. Whatever happened next, at least one human was not going to stand by and watch innocent people suffer. Darwin and Hyun stared at him in shock. Then they began to smile. Darwin dropped the dirt from his hand and turned to face Jiho completely. His yellow eyes looked the human up and down with amusement. Jiho was much smaller than the Saurian, barely reaching Darwin's chest in height. To most aliens, humans looked weak and unremarkable. "What did you just say, little human?" Darwin asked, his voice full of mock surprise. "Did you tell us to let you handle this?" "Handle what exactly?" Hyun's compound eyes glittered as he moved to stand beside his friend. His 6 legs clicked against the stone path as he positioned himself to block any escape route. "I think the new species does not understand how things work here," he buzzed with laughter. Jiho ignored both of them and walked directly to Nari. She was still kneeling on the ground, her skin flashing with confused patterns of blue and gold. No one had ever stepped in to help her before. She did not know what to think about this strange human boy. "Are you hurt?" Jiho asked her gently, extending his hand to help her stand up. His voice was calm and kind, completely different from the harsh tones Darwin and Hyun used. Nari looked at his outstretched hand with wonder. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense his emotions. There was no cruelty there, no hidden meanness, just genuine concern for her well-being. It was something she had never felt from a non-Valyrian before. She took his hand carefully. Her crystalline fingers felt cool and smooth against his warm human skin. As she stood up, her skin began to show soft golden patterns of gratitude and amazement. Jiho helped brush the dirt from her academy uniform. "You should not have to deal with this," he told her quietly. "No one should." "How touching," Dowan said sarcastically. "The human thinks he is a hero. This is not your business, Earth Boy. Walk away now and we will forget this happened." "Yeah," Hyun added, his wings buzzing with agitation. "Humans are new here. You do not want to make enemies so soon." But Jiho did not move away from Nari. Instead, he positioned himself between her and the two bullies. His stance was relaxed, but there was something in his eyes that made both aliens pause for a moment. "I am making it my business," Jiho said simply. "She has done nothing to you." "Leave her alone," Dowan laughed loudly. "Or what, you will fight us?" "Look at yourself, human. You are tiny compared to me. I could break you in half without trying hard." This was true. Saurians were much stronger than humans. Their thick scales protected them like natural armor, and their muscles were built for combat. In the galaxy, they were known as one of the most physically powerful species. Fighting is not allowed on the station anyway, Hyun pointed out. The Academy has strict rules about violence between species. You would be expelled immediately. That is correct, Dowan agreed with a nasty smile. So you cannot do anything to stop us. Why do you not run along to your classes like a good little human? Other students had started to notice the commotion. A few cerebrals floated nearby, their large heads pulsing with curiosity. Some Zephyrites gathered at the edge of the garden, clicking quietly to each other as they watched. But none of them came closer. This was standard behavior throughout the galaxy. When conflicts arose between different species, others stayed away to avoid getting involved. It was safer for everyone that way. Jiho looked around at all the watching faces. So many students, but none of them willing to help. This was what passed for civilization in galactic society. People looked the other way when the strong hurt the weak. "You are right," he said finally. "Fighting is against the rules. And you are much stronger than me." Dowan grinned widely, showing all his sharp teeth. Finally, the human understands reality. "But you misunderstood something important," Jiho continued, his voice still calm. "I never said anything about fighting you." The Saurian's grin faded slightly. "What do you mean?" Jiho stepped closer to Dowan, close enough that he had to look up to meet the alien's eyes. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I said I would handle this. Humans handle problems differently than other species." "How differently?" Hyun asked nervously. Something about the human's confidence was making him uncomfortable. "Well," Jiho said thoughtfully, "humans do not usually fight when we are angry. We do something much worse. We remember." He pulled out his electronic study pad and began typing rapidly. "For example, I am now recording everything that happened here today. The time, the location, the witnesses present, and exactly what you did to her." Dowan looked confused. "So what, you will report us?" "Teachers already know we do not like her. No one cares." "Oh, I am not reporting this to teachers," Jiho said with a small smile that did not reach his eyes. "I am sending this information to the Human Cultural Exchange Office, and to the Galactic Species Relations Committee, and to my sister who works in the Academy Administration." Both bullies were starting to look less confident now. "Humans have this thing called social media back on Earth," Jiho continued as he typed. "We share information very quickly with lots of people. By tonight, everyone at this academy will know exactly what you did today." "That does not matter," Dowan said, but his voice sounded less certain than before. "Really?" Jiho asked. "Because humans also have something called background checks. When you graduate and apply for jobs or advanced education, people will research your history. They will find out that you spent your time here bullying innocent students." Hyun's compound eyes were darting back and forth nervously. "You cannot prove anything." Jiho smiled wider and pointed at Nari. "Actually, I can. Valyrians are telepathic. She can share her memories of what happened here. Every detail, every emotion, every cruel word you said to her." For the first time, both bullies looked genuinely worried. They had not thought about the long-term consequences of their actions. "But here is what really makes humans different," Jiho said, putting his study pad away. "We do not just remember things ourselves. We make sure other people remember too. Forever." The watching students were murmuring now, passing along what they had heard to others who had just arrived. Word was spreading quickly through the station's communication networks. Dowan and Hyun exchanged nervous glances. This was not going the way they had expected at all. Dowan's face twisted with anger as he realized the human was not backing down. His reptilian pride could not accept being challenged by such a small creature. He took a heavy step forward, his clawed hands forming fists. "You think you are clever with your recording devices and your threats?" the Saurian growled. "But you are still just a weak human. Maybe it is time someone taught you how things really work here." He reached out with one massive hand to grab Jiho's shoulder. In Saurian culture, physical dominance settled all arguments. Once he showed the human who was stronger, this annoying problem would be over. But Jiho moved in a way that surprised everyone watching. Instead of backing away or trying to block the grab, he stepped forward and slightly to the side. Doan's hand closed on empty air as the human slipped past his reach. "Interesting," Jiho said calmly. "You know, most species in the galaxy evolved past physical aggression thousands of years ago. But humans are different. We only stopped fighting wars about 50 years ago. We still remember how it works." Dowan spun around and tried to grab him again, but Jiho was no longer where he expected. The human had moved behind him with quick, smooth steps that looked almost like dancing. "The thing about human evolution," Jiho continued as he avoided another clumsy grab, "is that we spent millions of years as hunters. We did not hunt big, slow animals like some species. We hunted fast, dangerous predators that could kill us easily if we made mistakes." Hyun tried to help his friend by rushing at Jiho from the side, but the human saw him coming and simply stepped backward. The Zephyrite's momentum carried him into Dowan, and both aliens stumbled into each other. The watching students gasped. No one had ever seen anything like this before. The human was not fighting exactly, but he was controlling the situation completely. "So we learned to think ahead," Jiho said as both aliens untangled themselves. "We learned to use our brains instead of just our muscles. And most importantly, we learned to work as a team." As if summoned by his words, footsteps could be heard approaching from multiple directions. Other human students were coming toward the garden. Not many, since there were only 12 humans total at the academy, but enough to change the situation dramatically. Mina Lee, Jiho's older sister, was the first to arrive. She worked as a teacher's aide, but she was also trained in human martial arts. Behind her came 2 other human students from the upper-level programs. "Is there a problem here?" Mina asked, her voice polite but her eyes hard as steel. She looked at Nari's dirt-stained uniform and the Valerian girl's distressed skin patterns. The evidence of what had happened was obvious. "No problem," Dowan said quickly. "Just a small misunderstanding between students." "Really?" said another human student, a tall boy named Wu who was studying galactic law. "Because it looks like you were forcing this young lady to eat dirt. That would be assault under station regulations." Hyun's wings buzzed nervously. "We were just having a conversation." "About what?" Mina asked. She pulled out her own recording device. "Please explain what kind of conversation requires someone to kneel in the dirt." More students from other species had gathered now. The botanical garden was becoming crowded with curious onlookers. But something was different about this crowd compared to the usual bystanders who ignored bullying incidents. The human students were not looking away. They were standing together, presenting a united front against the bullies. This was something completely new in galactic culture. Most species believed in individual responsibility and non-interference. But humans operated as a group when one of their members called for help. "You see," Jiho said to the gathered crowd, "humans have this concept called collective responsibility. When one of us sees injustice, we all respond to it. We do not leave individuals to face problems alone." A cerebral student floated closer, his large head pulsing with interest. "But you barely know this Valerian female. Why would you risk conflict for a stranger?" "Because she is not a stranger," Mina answered firmly. "She is a student at this academy, just like all of us. That makes her part of our community. Humans protect their community." Nari listened to this exchange with growing amazement. Her skin was showing patterns of gold and silver that the watching students had never seen before. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense the genuine protective feelings coming from all the humans present. It was unlike anything in her experience. "This is ridiculous," Doan said loudly. "She is just one weak Valerian. Why are you making such a big problem out of nothing?" That was exactly the wrong thing to say. Jiho's expression changed. The calm, almost friendly look disappeared from his face, replaced by something much colder. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but somehow more dangerous than shouting would have been. "She has a name," he said. "Her name is Nari. She is 16 years old. She has been attending this academy for 2 years, studying art and cultural communication. She has never hurt anyone in her entire life." He stepped closer to Dowan, and this time the Saurian actually took a step backward. "You called her weak, but I have been watching her for months now. Every day she comes to classes where students ignore her or treat her badly. Every day she sits alone at meals while others whisper about how her species is useless. Every day she endures bullying and harassment." The garden had become completely silent. Even the artificial breeze seemed to have stopped blowing. "And every day," Jiho continued, "she comes back. She keeps studying, keeps trying to learn, keeps hoping that things will get better. Do you know what humans call that kind of behavior?" Dowan said nothing. "We call it courage," Jiho said. "Real courage. Not the fake courage of picking on people smaller than you. The courage to keep going when everything around you is hostile and unfair." He looked around at all the watching students from different species. "You want to know what makes humans different? We recognize courage when we see it, and we protect it." The crowd began murmuring as students from various species started to understand what the human was saying. Some of them began looking at Nari with new eyes, seeing her daily struggles from a different perspective. Dowan and Hyun were trapped now. They could not use physical force because they were outnumbered and being recorded. They could not use social pressure because the crowd was turning against them. And they could not simply walk away because that would be admitting defeat in front of everyone. "What do you want from us?" Hyun asked desperately. Jiho smiled, but it was not a nice smile. "Oh, that is simple," he said. "We want you to apologize to Nari, publicly, right here, right now, in front of everyone." Both aliens looked horrified at the suggestion. Public apologies were considered humiliating in most galactic cultures. "And then," Mina added, "you are going to help us create new policies to prevent this kind of behavior in the future. And finally," Wu concluded, "you are going to learn about something humans call restorative justice. You are going to make up for the harm you have caused." The two bullies looked around desperately for support but found none. Even students from their own species were watching with disapproval now. They were about to learn that humans did not just fight differently than other species. They also solved problems differently, and human solutions tended to be very thorough. The botanical garden had become an outdoor courthouse. Students from dozens of species formed a circle around the confrontation, their various forms of communication creating a buzz of activity. Cerebrals pulsed with thoughtful lights, Zephyrite clicked in rapid conversations, and even the usually silent ethereals had materialized to observe. Academy security arrived within minutes, alerted by the crowd and the electronic reports that human students had been filing continuously. Officer Kex, a tall Altarian with silver skin and forearms, pushed through the gathered students. "What is happening here?" Officer Kex demanded. His translator device made his words sound sharp in everyone's native language. "A learning experience," Mina said calmly. She gestured to her recording device. "We have documented evidence of systematic harassment and assault. We are currently working on a resolution." Officer Kex looked confused. In galactic society, conflicts between species were usually handled through formal complaints and lengthy diplomatic procedures. Direct confrontation like this was almost unknown. "The proper procedure is to file a report," he said. "These matters should be handled through official channels." "We tried official channels," Wu replied, pulling out his study pad. "I have records of 17 separate incidents involving these two students harassing Valerian attendees over the past 6 months. 7 formal complaints were filed. All were dismissed as cultural misunderstandings." A gasp went through the crowd. Many students had no idea the bullying had been so widespread and systematic. "That cannot be correct," Officer Kex protested. "Oh, but it is," said another voice from the edge of the garden. Professor Chen, a human instructor in the Cultural Studies Department, approached with several data pads in her hands. "We have been conducting our own investigation," she announced to the gathered students. "What happened here today is just the latest incident in a pattern of behavior that has been ignored by official channels." Professor Chen was one of the few human faculty members at the academy. She had been documenting problems with interspecies bullying since her arrival, but her reports had been largely ignored by the administration. The Human Cultural Exchange Program has been gathering evidence for months, she continued. We have testimony from 14 different students who have been targeted by systematic harassment, all from what the Academy considers weaker species. Dawan and Hyun looked increasingly desperate as the scope of the human investigation became clear. This is all lies, Dawan said loudly. They are making this up to cause trouble for our species. Actually, said a new voice, soft and musical, they are telling the truth. Everyone turned to look at Nari. She had been quiet throughout most of the confrontation, but now she stepped forward. Her crystalline skin was glowing with patterns of silver and gold that indicated determination. I can prove what they are saying, she said, her voice growing stronger. I am telepathic. I can share my memories with anyone who wishes to see them. This was a significant offer. Valyrian memory sharing was considered legally binding evidence throughout the galaxy. No court would question testimony that came directly from telepathic experience. I can show you every incident, Nari continued. Every cruel word, every threat, every time they made me feel afraid to come to classes. Other Valyrian students can do the same. A murmur went through the crowd as the implications became clear. If multiple telepathic witnesses came forward, the evidence would be overwhelming. But that is not all I can share, Nari said, looking directly at the human students. I can also show you what it felt like when someone finally stood up for me. Her skin began to glow with warm golden patterns as she looked at Jiho. I have never experienced anything like human emotions before. Through my telepathy, I could feel his genuine desire to protect me, even though he barely knows me. It was beautiful. She turned to address the entire crowd. Humans feel responsible for others in a way that my species has never encountered. They see injustice and feel compelled to act even when it costs them something. A cerebral student floated closer, his large head pulsing with interest. This is fascinating. Could you share this emotional experience with us? We would like to understand this human trait better. Nari nodded and extended her hands toward the gathered students. Anyone who wishes to understand can touch my hands and experience what I experienced. Several students from different species approached cautiously. Valyrian memory sharing was normally private, but this was an unprecedented situation. As each student touched Nari's crystalline hands, their expressions changed. The cerebrals' heads began pulsing with amazement. The Zephyrite's compound eyes widened with surprise. Even the ethereals became more visible as they processed the unfamiliar emotions. Incredible, whispered a cerebral. These humans feel genuine empathy for complete strangers. They experience another being's pain as if it were their own. And they act on these feelings immediately, added a Zephyrite. No lengthy consideration of consequences or diplomatic implications. They simply respond to perceived injustice. Word of what was happening spread rapidly through the station's communication networks. Students from other sections began arriving to witness the demonstration. Faculty members started gathering as well, drawn by reports of the unusual situation. Dr. Vex, the ancient cerebral who taught galactic history, floated into the garden with several other professors. What is the meaning of this gathering? He projected to the crowd. We are learning about human social behavior, Professor Chen replied, and discovering some significant problems with our current anti-harassment policies. Dr. Vex examined the evidence that human students had compiled. His head pulsed with thoughtful patterns as he reviewed recordings, witness statements, and documented incidents. This is most disturbing, he projected after several minutes. How did these problems escape official attention for so long? Because the current system assumes that students will solve their own problems, Mina answered. It works fine for species that have similar power levels and social structures, but it fails completely when stronger species target weaker ones. Humans recognize this as a systemic problem, Wu added. We do not believe that victims should have to handle bullying alone. Officer Kex was looking more and more uncomfortable as the scope of the problem became clear. What do you propose we do about it? We propose a complete review of Academy policies, Professor Chen said, with human input on how to create effective anti-bullying measures. And we propose immediate consequences for the perpetrators, Jiho added, pointing at Dawan and Hyun. Starting with a public apology to their victims. The two bullies looked around desperately for support, but found none. Even students from their own species were looking at them with disapproval now. We are sorry, Hyun said quickly, his buzzing voice barely audible. Louder, Mina said firmly, and be specific about what you are apologizing for. We are sorry for harassing Nari and other students, Dowan said reluctantly. We will not do it again. That is just the beginning, Jiho said. Tomorrow you are going to help us present our findings to the Academy administration. You are going to support new policies that protect all students from harassment. As the crowd began to disperse, many students approached the humans with questions about their social behaviors and protective instincts. It was clear that this incident had changed how many species viewed humanity. But for Jiho, the most important moment came when Nari approached him as the garden emptied. Thank you, she said simply, her skin glowing with grateful patterns. You did not have to help me, but you did anyway. Yes, I did have to, Jiho replied with a smile. That is what humans do. We help each other. As they walked back toward the academy buildings together, neither of them realized that this day had marked a turning point in galactic education policy. Humans had introduced concepts that would spread throughout the galaxy: collective responsibility, active intervention against injustice, and the idea that protecting others was not just a choice, but a moral obligation. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the newest species had the most important lessons to teach. 3 weeks had passed since the incident in the botanical garden. The academy felt different now, though many students could not explain exactly how or why. The most obvious change was the new anti-harassment policies that had been implemented across the entire station. Human students had worked with academy administrators to create what they called a zero-tolerance system. Any student who reported bullying would be taken seriously immediately. Multiple species would investigate each complaint, and victims would receive support while cases were resolved. But the deeper change was in how students from different species interacted with each other. Jiho walked through the dining hall during lunch period, observing these changes. The Valerian section was no longer empty except for Nari. 3 other Valerian students now sat with her, sharing their telepathic art while they ate. Their table glowed with beautiful patterns of light as they communicated through their thoughts. At a nearby table, a young cerebral was struggling with his food dispenser. Instead of ignoring the problem, a Zephyrite student quickly moved to help him fix the machine. A month ago, such interspecies assistance would have been unusual. The ripple effects are remarkable, said a voice behind him. Jiho turned to see Dr. Vex floating nearby, his large head pulsing with contemplative patterns. The ancient cerebral had become fascinated with human social behavior since the garden incident. What do you mean? Jiho asked. Your species has introduced a concept that many of us had forgotten, Dr. Vex explained. Active compassion. Most galactic species practice passive non-interference. We avoid causing harm, but we also avoid actively preventing harm to others. That seems wrong to us, Jiho said simply. Yes, we have noticed, Dr. Vex replied with what might have been amusement. Humans appear to have an instinctive drive to protect others, even at personal cost. It is quite unusual among spacefaring species. Across the dining hall, Jiho could see Dowan and Hyun sitting together at their usual table, but something was different about them too. They were quieter now, less arrogant. The public apology had been difficult for them, but the real change had come afterward. As part of their restorative justice process, they had been required to attend counseling sessions with human psychology specialists. They learned about empathy, about seeing situations from other perspectives, and about the long-term damage that bullying could cause. Dowan had even approached Nari privately the week before to offer a more sincere apology. Through her telepathic abilities, she could sense that his remorse was genuine. The experience of being held accountable for his actions had changed him in ways he was still trying to understand. The most interesting aspect, Dr. Vex continued, is how quickly other species have adopted human intervention behaviors. Yesterday, I observed a group of ethereal students preventing harassment in the physics laboratory. They simply made themselves visible and asked if there was a problem. The potential bullies stopped immediately. This was true. Word of the human approach to handling conflicts had spread throughout the station. Students who had always minded their own business were beginning to speak up when they saw others being mistreated. It is as if you have reminded us of something we lost during our evolution toward civilization, Dr. Vex mused. The willingness to act for others rather than just for ourselves. Jiho spotted his sister Mina entering the dining hall with several other faculty members. She had been promoted to Director of Student Welfare, a new position created specifically to address the problems uncovered by the human investigation. Jiho, she called, approaching his table. Perfect timing. We wanted to talk to you about something important. Dr. Vex floated back slightly to give them privacy, but remained close enough to listen. The Academy administration has made a decision, Mina continued. They want to implement the Human Social Intervention Program across all galactic educational facilities. They are asking if you would help design the training materials. Jiho felt surprised. Me? I am just a student. You are the student who started all of this, said Professor Chen, who had joined the group. Your actions in the garden have become a case study throughout the galactic education system. Other academies are reporting similar problems, added Dr. Kess, the station's new counseling coordinator. Systematic harassment that was being ignored because it crossed species lines. They want to learn how to implement human-style intervention policies. Jiho looked around the dining hall again. Near the entrance, he could see Nari talking with a group of mixed-species students. Her skin was glowing with happy golden patterns as she shared something with them through her telepathic abilities. She has been teaching other students about telepathic empathy, Mina explained, following his gaze, showing them how to understand what others are feeling. It is revolutionary for most species, and she says it was your example that taught her she could share her abilities to help others, Professor Chen added. This surprised Jiho even more. I did not teach her anything. I just helped when she needed help. Exactly, Dr. Vex interjected, his head pulsing with emphasis. You demonstrated active intervention without expecting anything in return. This behavior has inspired students from dozens of species to reconsider their own social obligations. Will you help us? Mina asked. The galaxy needs to learn what humans know about protecting each other. Jiho thought about this for a moment. When he had first arrived at the academy, he had felt like an outsider from a primitive species. Now he was being asked to help teach advanced civilizations about social responsibility. I will help, he said finally, but not just me. It should be a human team, and we should include students from other species too, especially the ones who have been targets of harassment. Of course, Professor Chen agreed. This should be a collaborative effort. As the faculty members moved away to continue their planning, Dr. Vex remained behind. I have a question for you, the ancient cerebral said. Do all humans feel this drive to protect others, or are you unusual among your species? Jiho considered this carefully. Most humans feel it, he said. We have different ways of expressing it, and some people are better at acting on it than others. But the basic instinct is pretty common. Fascinating, Dr. Vex mused. Perhaps this is why your species adapted so quickly to galactic society, despite being newcomers. You instinctively work to improve conditions for everyone, not just yourselves. Later that evening, Jiho found himself back in the botanical garden where everything had started. The area had become a popular gathering place for students from different species who wanted to practice interspecies communication. Nari was there, sitting peacefully under the purple-leaved tree where Jiho had first hidden while watching her being bullied. Her skin glowed softly with contentment as she worked on a telepathic art project. May I join you? Jiho asked. Of course, she replied, her patterns shifting to welcoming golds and greens. I was hoping you would come. They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching other students interact nearby. A group of cerebrals was attempting to learn Zephyrite communication clicks, while several ethereals had become visible to participate in a discussion about philosophy. I wanted to thank you again, Nari said eventually, not just for helping me that day, but for showing me that I could help others too. You were always capable of helping others, Jiho replied. You just needed to see that it was possible. My species always believed that our role was to create beauty and share peaceful thoughts, she explained. We never considered that we could actively work to prevent suffering. Maybe that is the real lesson here, Jiho suggested. Not that humans are special, but that every species has something valuable to contribute to making life better for everyone. Nari's skin shimmered, with patterns that Jiho had learned meant deep agreement and joy. The Academy is planning to create an interspecies cooperation council, she told him. Representatives from each species will work together to solve problems and prevent conflicts. They asked me to be the Valyrian representative. That is wonderful, Jiho said sincerely. You will be perfect for that role. They asked you to represent humans too, she added with amusement. Did you know that? Jiho had not known, but somehow he was not surprised. The events that had started with a simple decision to help someone in trouble had grown into something much larger. As they talked, more students began gathering in the garden. It had become an evening tradition for different species to meet here and share their cultures, their problems and their solutions. Tonight, a young Saurian was teaching self-defense techniques to a group of smaller species, while a cerebral shared advanced mathematical concepts with anyone interested. The Bullies' former victims had become teachers and leaders in their own right. Do you think this will really spread to other academies? Nari asked. I think it has to, Jiho replied, watching the diverse group of students working together. Once you show people that things can be better, they do not want to go back to the old ways. As the artificial evening cycle began and the garden lights dimmed to simulate sunset, Jiho reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The galaxy was learning that civilization was not just about avoiding conflict, but about actively creating conditions where everyone could thrive. And it had all started with a simple human instinct. When someone needs help, you help them. The stars visible through the garden's transparent dome seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself approved of this new direction. The galaxy was becoming a more compassionate place, one intervention at a time, and humans, the newest and supposedly most primitive species, had shown everyone else the way forward.